about all the strategies that you are doing right now. Uh, I'm thinking that since a long time you are playing the peaceful resistance in the coup territories, and if you think that peaceful resistance is sustainable in long term face the repression.
So for myself, I think that personally that I believe on the peaceful resistance. So although that the vast majority of the Sahrawis do not. So to be honestly, so the vast majority do not because they always believe that they have been cheated by the United Nations. So the presidents of the United Nations since 1991, they did nothing. My colleagues, they called the United Nations United Nothing because they did nothing for the Sahrawis. But I always believe that there is a way in the civil resistance. I can prove you, for example, that in 2010 or before, in 2005, all the Sahrawis, they get out in the streets and what we called it Intifadat al-Istiqlal, which is the uprisings of the independence, where Sahrawis, thousands of Sahrawis, they have been went out in the streets and not only in the occupied cities, but also in the historical Western Sahara, which is south of Morocco now, you know, Tantan, Tafaya, and others, where a majority of the inhabitants are Sahrawis. They extended this to the Moroccan campuses where Sahrawi students there studying there, because still this moment there are no university in occupied Western Sahara. And Morocco cannot invest in Western Sahara in such level because they have always doubts that they will lose the battle against the Sahrawis. In 2010, while the Moroccans, they say that they control everything in Western Sahara, thousands of Sahrawi, they have been created what they called it the civil disobedience. It's a kind of the civil resistance when they established their tents and to call the United Nations, call the international community that we are living under the marginalization, and then they call for the self-determination. Because how to live under more than 4 decades under such kind of repression and kind of brutality committed by the Moroccans, if I try to explain to you, you know already, Hector, that thousands of Sahrawi that have been killed, they have burned alive, they have buried alive, burned alive and buried alive. A lot of crimes that a lot of people, they have no idea about it. So even, for example, Mudrega, that is very similar to Srebrenica. So when thousands of Sahrawis, they have been bombarded, they have been, planes, they killed. And then Morocco, they built the longest wall, separate the Western Sahara into parts, as you know. So how can this, brave people could still going on, never give up? In 2010, thousands of Sahrawis went outside in the suburb of La'youn and they chanted and they created such kind of camps with only the Sahrawis controlled by them, well organized. So it's a sign that the Sahrawis, they have civilized, well organized. It's kind of a message, a clear message to the international community. So this gives me hope that the civil resistance, if we continue, for example, in such way, it will help. I'm not sure, for example, to say that we'll get independence through the civil resistance. It's like, for example, the magic. But anyway, it's kind of a parallel battle with the right to the Sahrawis for the armed struggle, as we have seen, for example, since November 13, 2020, when the Sahrawis, they resumed the armed struggle. It's for example, kind of how to compare the Sahrawis, that both sides, the armed struggle led by the Polisario, well organized, not giving, for example, any doubts, but the Sahrawi, that it's a liberation movement, of course. But in the same time, the Sahrawi civil resistance play the important role to show to the world that we are still exist in the Western Sahara. I'm still believing on this, of course, even that I'm representing only a very, very minority from the Sahrawis, because the vast majority not believe in any way by that so-called, for example, the peaceful resistance or the dialogue with the Moroccans, because they have been cheated many, many, many times, of course, not only by the Moroccans occupiers, but also by the neighboring countries, like, for example, Mauritania and Spain, that they have been engaged since 1975 to divide the Western Sahara without the consent and the consultations of the Sahara people.
I mean, you talk that about 2010, that you send a message there for the international community. Do you believe that this message is being heard? And also related to the thing of the civil disobedience and the peaceful resistance, do you think that there exists a tipping point where that is not possible?
So as I said, because yeah, it's very difficult, because even that we work, I have a long experience for more than 30 years now, as an activist. And I saw in these 30 years, in 3 decades, a lot of things which really impressed me. But of course, I lost the confidence about the international community, but I will not give up. I will continue. This is what I mean. For example, that when I have subjected last year, for example, from an assassination attempt, and I was really brutally attacked by 4 members belonging to Moroccan intelligence services. They tried to kill me, and they chanted and they called some things that is very clear that they belong to the Moroccan intelligence services. In the same time, before that, I was arrested alongside with my colleague Ahmed Tanji, and we have been deported from the city of Boujdour. So could you imagine, Hector, that we could not? So we're not, for example, we are prohibited to visit, for example, Boujdour or Sahara. So I couldn't, for example, move in the occupied cities. Why? Because the Moroccans, they are always afraid and has doubt that we will contact or will incite people, for example, for the civil resistance, because they know already that all the Sahrawis, it's like, for example, that there is a tension, and they're always thinking that, like, for example, there is some things that can ignite in the demonstrations against the Moroccans. All the Sahrawi are upset by the occupation. All the Sahrawi are upset by the dealing of Morocco with the Sahrawis. And they are always expecting that there are someone who can ignite this. But specifically those activists, or those prominent activists, they are prohibited from the visiting. For example, I'm prohibited alongside with others from visiting Boujdour, Smara, or Dakhla. So no way to visit them. Ahmed Naji is in Boujdour. And he called me and he told me that he was under constant surveillance by the Moroccan agents, and they threatened him to deport him. So probably they will deport him, of course. So he arrived only yesterday to attend a ceremony of I mean, a wedding ceremony, but he will be deported. So it's the same. Even that, a lot of, for example, United Nations mechanisms, rapporteurs, working group, statements delivered by many international human rights organizations, like, for example, the so-called Observatory that denounces the Moroccan practices in the occupied Western Sahara. You know, but still, I mean, Morocco is deaf on that, not reacting. There are some Western countries that always encourage the Moroccan occupying authorities to do more and more. So the main or the core of the things is how to protect the systematic plundering of natural resources in the Western Sahara, how to satisfy those colonial countries from so, but that means that we should also solid or strengthening the Sahrawi civil society in the occupied Western Sahara.
Mm-hmm.
How to build, I mean, the bridge between the associations and between the Sahrawi citizens in front of these new methods by the Morocco, because now I think Morocco is playing for two important things to strengthen their presence in the Western Sahara. The first is sending troops of the Moroccan settlers, building settlements in the Western Sahara, changing the demographic situations in the occupied territories to be in favor of Moroccans. The second thing is how to use the benefits of natural resources to strengthen their occupation. So this is what we call the fuel of the occupation. If we stopped these two things, I think that we will go forward to achieve our goal. I mean, to bring or to push the Moroccan to put more pressure on Morocco in order to resolve the issue. Otherwise, I think that we will wait for many years about that. So it's very difficult, it's very tricky, but yeah, but it's kind of my belief or my thoughts is always strengthen the internal front to give them what we call it in Arabic مقومات الصمود, which is the pillars of the steadfast, the resilience inside occupied territories.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you, Hector, for example, that Moroccans use to impoverish the Sahrawis inside the occupied territories. This is the methods. This is the traditional methods used by them. I was fired from my job, for example, twice. I was a civil servant in the municipality, was fired in 2007, and I was rehired, and I was teacher in high school, and I was fired from my job. And it's extend to our families, this kind of retaliation, because my wife was always a civil servant, and she was also fired from her job. It's kind of to put you in a corner. It's the same systematic. Sahrawis graduated from universities. They found themselves that unemployed, and the Moroccans tried to send messages to them that you could not, for example, engage in to get a job. So the only way is to immigrate clandestinely to Spain, or recently to Guyana, where more than 3,000 Sahrawi recently have been going to Guyana in order to asking or seeking asylum, the political asylum, from Guyana to Europe. It's kind of to empty the occupied territories, but in the same time, to build the new waves of demography with Moroccans. So more Moroccans than the Sahrawis now. So we are a very minority in the occupied territories. But why? Because there is no, for example, the pillars of the steadfasting, of the resilience that could, for example, help me to stay in the occupied territories. The young people say that there is nothing, for example, that can help me to stay. So I have, look, for example, I'm 40 years old saying, or I'm 30 years old, I'm in 30s or in 40s. So I couldn't, for example, stay more than that. I should seek, for example, I mean, the subsistence of my living. I have to marry, I have to do. This is our fault as a Sahrawi since 1991. We never, for example, asking for what the Palestinians did, like, for example, the UNRWA, which is recruit and give him, for example, I mean, jobs for the Palestinians in their homeland. In occupied Western Sahara, United Nations mission in Western Sahara only keeping the ceasefire, doing nothing for the Sahrawis. How we can keep going in the occupied territories? So this is how the Sahrawis, they criticize the rule, but I'm the kind of encouraging, for example, the Sahrawi decision makers to find, for example, the way how to give or still supporting, for example, the Sahrawis from occupied territories in order to always be steadfast and resilient in front of the occupation.
Analyze the situation of immigration in the occupied territories, among the, especially the young people in the occupied territories. What factors you consider more important to live there? Because you mentioned that the United Nations maybe do something in that direction to give more opportunities for the Sahrawis to stay in the occupied territories. But I mean, for me, it's something that is difficult for me to understand the relation with the United Nations. I mean, because during all these years, I don't see acts of United Nations in the Western Sahara to make us believe in United Nations. So this is strange.
No, I mean that you misunderstand. I think that there is a misunderstanding because I say that United Nations did nothing for the Sahrawis. So in contrary, I think United Nations since 1991 did nothing. Only they keeping the ceasefire. So in contrary, they recruit more Moroccans in the main also. When you came to occupied Lyon, Smara, Dakhla, the presidents of United Nations, all the staff are mostly Moroccans. So are not only Moroccans, but are agents in the service because so the United Nations was part of the Moroccan civilians. And this is, for example, a lot of testimonies by high rank officials of United Nations. They declare it clearly, Frank Rodi and others. But I say that United Nations did nothing for the resilience of the Sahrawi. But if we make a comparison with the Palestine, we think that the UNRWA did a lot of things for the Palestinians. There is schools, there is jobs, there is a lot of things. But in the occupied Western Sahara, United Nations did nothing for the Sahrawis. But for the Moroccans, yes. So how can you imagine that the Sahrawis could have the resilience, the steadfasting, for example, how can continue our struggle, for example, or saying our civil resistance in the occupied territories? This is very difficult, this is very tricky, and this is the systematic strategy that always prove that there is a plot against the Sahrawis, not only for the former colonial power and their allies in the region, mean Spain and the neighboring country, Morocco and Mauritania, but also United Nations as, you know, because we always say that United Nations came to resolve the issue. I think that there is the management of the conflict and there is a resolution of the conflict. And the United Nations never have the intention to resolve the issue, but they manage, for example, the issue. It's they say, for example, I have a friend of mine who told me in 90s, he told me that the referendum postponed to a date that will be postponed. Do you get it?
Yes, let's say that. Yes.
That would be, because we always say that United Nations have, postponed the United Nations mission until 31st October. When 31st October, we will see the same thing. So they postponed for other years. But there is no the intention to resolve the issue. Due the complicity of the former colonial power. So always Spain do not have, the intention to resolve the issue. Why? Because they always have, they are afraid for a failed state in Morocco. Spain, this is, the decision makers in Spain, they said it clearly, that always we not, for example, want a failed state in Morocco. But it's kind of, the plot that always play, for example, for the farmers, the French, I called it the Franco-Espanol alliance, because they always saying that we can, for example, give arms, we can give, for example, support to the refugee camps in order to stay there. But if they have, for example, the intention to resolve the conflict of Western Sahara, according to the international law, their commitment, if the Spain believe that there is a Sahrawi, the only Arab people speak Spanish, shared with them the culture, shared with them a lot of things. This is just for example, nostalgia from some Sahrawis. But there is no attention for resolving the issue, in my view.